Today's daf is daf Vav. We are going to begin on daf Vav Amid Aleph, the top line of the Ella. The Gemara brought different rayas till now that we don't say that since a person is choshed for stealing, we suspect him from lying as well. And we tried to bring different rayas if we say immediately the choshed amemena choshed ashvuasa. So now the Gemara says like this: but according to Rav Nachman, if we say that a person is suspected of theft, and so we also suspect him of swearing falsely, so the Chayron, Rav Nachman says that when a person denies Chayiv entirely, he's Chayiv for Hakil, the din is Mashpim, I say, Shuas Eses. We administer an oath, Midrabanan on him. And the question is, if we say the chashed amemena chashed ashvuasa, so here in this case, name amiga the chashed amemena chashed ashvuasa. Why don't we say that since you suspect with regards to being dishonest when it comes to money, we suspect him with regard to taking the shvua? So another question of the Tanur Rav Chia. That which Rav Chia teaches in a brayso with regards to the case of a chenveni and a balabas. We have this case already on Rav Gimel and Aleph. And the case is, if an employer, a balabas, owed money to his employee. So he told the storekeeper, he says, you give him money or credit or food, and I'll repay you. So the chenveni, the storekeeper, says he gave it to him, and the employee says, I never got it. So the din is shneim nishboim v'neitlim mibalabais. Both parties take a shvua and take payment from the employer. So this is also a question, because we know for sure one of them is lying. Why don't we say that we should suspect that being that he's being dishonest about money, we suspect that he's being dishonest, or one of them is being dishonest with the oath. Yet the din is that both of them make us swear and take from the balabas. Why don't we say miga the chashed amemena chashed ashvuasa? The third thing is v'osua the almer Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes says, or what we learned in regards to what Rav Sheshes says, shalish shvuos mashpei naisei. The dayanim administer 3 oaths to a sheber chinam who claims that the bikadon which he entrusted, or which was entrusted to him, was stolen. So what are the 3 shvuas? Number 1, shvua sheli pashati ba. I take a shvua that I was not negligent in the pikadon and safeguarding it. Number 2, shvua sheli shalachti ba yad. I make an oath that I did not touch it, I did not misappropriate the deposits. And also 3, shvua she'ena b'rshasi. I hereby take an oath that the pikadon is no longer my possession. So now, if the Beis Din is suspecting the shemer chinam of stealing, name him miga de chashed amemena chashed ashvuasa. The Gemara brings says you must conclude elalei amrinan from all these cases you see that we do not say miga de chashed amemena chashed ashvuasa. We do not say that since one is suspected of financial dishonesty, he's suspected with regards to taking a shvua. Abaya says no. There is no proof from these 3 halachas cited above that a shvua is administered to a person who is chashed amemena. Can be explained that the reason that the shvua is administered in these cases has nothing to do of if we say miga de chashed amemena chashed ashvuasa or not. Rather, chashinan shema milva yishana yesh le'alav. We suspect that perhaps the defendant has an old loan which he lent to the now plaintiff, and he has been unable to get back the money. So what happens? He's therefore withholding or claiming ownership of the item or money of the plaintiff as repayment of the loan, and not an act of outright robbery. So in these cases, when the shemer chinam or these other cases, we suspect that the shemer chinam really had or feels that he had a loan that was owed to him by this person who deposited it. So therefore, an oath is administered to him because he's not chashed, he doesn't think he's stealing. So you have no raya, or not. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, nishko b'lei shua. So why does he take a shua in these cases? Let him take the item or money without taking a shua. As perhaps he's withholding it as a repayment for an old loan, in which case the oath will not determine the truth in the dispute at hand. Elo, rather, Abaye says like this: we suspect that perhaps he's uncertain as to whether he has an old loan that he lent to the plaintiff. So the teveh is unsure whether the plaintiff owes him money and is withholding the item just in case. So the Gemara asks, why don't we say in this case that if the defendant is capable of seizing another property due to the suffix, he'll also take a shua falsely due to the same uncertainty. So how could you give him a shua? He says, people refrain from taking an oath which they are uncertain, but do not refrain from seizing property about which they are uncertain. My time, what is the reason? People say that property can be returned. An oath cannot be retracted. If it is proven that his seizure of property was unjustified, the defendant can return it. By contrast, once he takes a shua, a false oath, there's no remedy for that situation. Therefore, one is more cautious when taking a shua than seizing property. Okay, now we're going to speak about a very famous sugya, if you remember in the yeshiva, about Tokfa Kain. This is the sugya called Tokfa Echad B'Faneinu, Tokfa Kain. We're not going to have in this year, the time to actually elaborate on the sugya and what comes out from the sugya. And the Rambam L'cheira says what the Gemara says. There's a whole shach on this in Tokfa Kain, beautiful, beautiful sugya. But we'll try to get into the basics. Okay. Boy Reb Zera says, if two people together had a garment in their grasp, and Tokfa Echad B'Faneinu, one of them seized it entirely from the grasp of the other in our presence, before the Beis Din. So each one was holding it, and one guy came and took, in front of Beis Din, took the whole thing. Ma'u, what is the din? So the Gemara is trying to understand Reb Zera's question. Hey Chidami, what are the circumstances? Either shasik, if the one from whom it was seized remains silent, now the din is ideally. Fact is shtika kaido, and his silence indicates that he admits to the one who seized from him that he is the owner. So what's the question? And if he shouted in protest at the seizure, so my have what more should he have done? The fact that another person is stronger than him is irrelevant as far as determining the legal ownership of the garment is concerned, because he's screaming about it. So the Gemara says, what Zera's question is, of Tokfa Echad B'Faneinu, is where they're talking about a case where he was silent initially, when the other litigant seized the garment, and then he later shouted. Now, midi ishtik. So the question is like this. So what's the halacha? Midi ishtik. Do we say that when he was silent, ideally, he admitted to the one who seized it for him that in seizing it, the litigant became the owner, and then he regretted it, so he now shouted? Or perhaps do I say, Kivin the Katsava Chashta, do I say, since he is shouting now about the injustice that was done to him, Igloi Milsa Dai Deshasing Mikara, the matter is revealed that the fact that he was silent initially suffers because he thought the Chachamim on the base of the song grab it from me, and there's no need to cry out. So that's the question. Do I say the fact that he was silent, he's being made, or the fact that he's crying now shows that the reason why he was quiet is because he thought Beis Din will stick up for him. So now the question is, Tokfa Echad B'Faneinu, what's the din? Amar Rav Nachman says, Tal Shema, come and hear a solution to the shaila from those Tana Brisa. In what case do we say that both of them take a shvua and each receives half of the garment? Is in a case where both of them are holding on to the garment. But if the garment was in possession of only one of them, so the din is, the burden of proof rests upon the person who's not holding it. And the fact is, in the absence of proof, the item remains in the possession of the one holding the garment. So the Gemara says, hey, Chidami, what is the case? If we say that it's to be understood as we said, then Pshita, it's obvious that the one who claims an item that is in another possession has to bring proof to support his claim. Ella, rather, it must be the case is, Shetakva Echel B'Fanenu. So referring to that case, for one of them sees in our presence, which is mamish the case of Reb Zeno. And what do we say over here? That we say that Takva Echel B'Fanenu, L'cheiro, is first the Reb Zeno's case. So now the question is, this is a good raya too. We had a question of Takva Echel B'Fanenu, what's the din? So I see that when do I say that they split it is when Shteim Adukam B'Talis. But if one of them is Yitzim B'Talis Yil De'Shalachat, which we establish must be the case of Takva Echel B'Fanenu, he does not get it back. We say, so the Gemara says, look, this is not the case. And what are we dealing with over here? We're dealing with a case where they came before the Beis Din while holding the garment. And we said to them, Zilu pligo, go divide the garment. Or the Fakon, they left the Beis Din. So the Beis Din said, go divide it, and they left the Beis Din, and afterwards they came back while one of them was holding on to it. Hi, Omar. So the one who was holding on to it. So what happened? We're talking about a case where they came before the Beis Din, and they were both holding the. We just started earlier. So now we're talking about a case where they came before the Beis Din while both of them are holding on to the garment. So what did we say? We said, okay, go divide the garment. They left Beis Din, and afterwards came back, and only one of them was holding on. So the one who was holding on to the garment said, he said that the guy admitted that I was justified in my claim. Hi, Omar. And that one, the one not holding the garment, says, Bidmei Egarten Hali. The one not holding the garment said, I rented half of the garment to him for money, and I did not relinquish my right. So in that case, the latter person's claim is not accepted. Until now, you suspected of him being a robber. You're claiming that he took the item from you. And now you're renting it to him without witnesses. Therefore, onto the one who's not holding on to the garment. And if you want to say that, it's possible to say Kediktani. As the Raisa said, they came before us while only one of them holding on to the garment, while the other was hanging on to the edge of the garment. And even according to Sumkas, which we brought down, holds in the case of property of a suffix that they divided without a shua, made the Sumkas will agree, the Sir Chalaf Klumi, that holding on to the edge is worth nothing, and it does not render the ownership of the garment a suffix, and therefore rests on the one who's hanging on to the edge. Okay, so now Reb Zera's dilemma was not resolved. Right? So the Gemara asked, in the beginning Reb Zera asked, what's the din? If both of them came into Beis Din holding on to the garment together, and then one of them grabbed it by the Beis Din, so what's the din? So the Gemara says, if the guy's quiet, so obviously it belongs to the guy who grabbed it. And if he screams, so his screaming should be a fine protest. So the Gemara says, we're talking about a case that he first kept quiet and then he screamed. Do I say that he kept quiet, that means that he's being maida? Or do I say that since he screamed at the end, so Megala Milsa, that he was not happy with this? And the reason why he kept quiet is because he thought the Beis Din will speak up for him. So Rav Nachman says, bring a raya from this mission, from our Brisa. So the Brisa says, what do I say that Cholkan b'shua is when both of them are holding on to the garment. But if one of them was holding on to it, then the other person was not, the din is ha'metzia mechavere alavaraya. And the Gemara says, what's this price? If it's talking about, like we said, so obviously ha'metzia mechavere alavaraya. Elamai must be the case of tak v'echad b'faninu. So the Gemara says, no, that's not a case of tak v'echad b'faninu. Here, that's the case where they came before the Beis Din, each one holding on to half of it, and basically said, okay, go split it. And then they came back, and what the first guy said, he relinquished his rights. He admitted that the garment belongs to me. And the guy says, no, I rented it from him. So we tell the guy, you didn't trust him till now, we don't trust you that you rented it to him. Second answer is that one of them was holding on to it, and the other one was just holding on to the edges. So even though, according to Sumchus, who says, my Sumchus will agree to this case. So now, we don't really have an answer to his question. What's the din? So the Gemara says like this. Now, even if you want to say that if a person seizes the garment in our presence, the Beis Din will remove from his possession. Question is hikdisha. Then if either of the parties was makdish the entire garment of the Beis Hamikdash, any mekudeshes. So the consecration is not valid, as is not his. But if you say that, so then obviously if he's makdish it, any mekudeshes. But if you say what if one of them was makdish the entire garment of the Beis Hamikdash to the Beis Hamikdash without seizing it? Now, what's the din? So the Gemara side, the two sides of the dilemma are as follows. Since the Brisa says, with regards to the halachas of transactions, that amirasa the gavea kemisirasa lehadidami, that a declaration of the Most High is equivalent to a transfer to an ordinary person. In other words, verbal consecration of an item is equivalent to an act of a kinyan, is that one who consecrates the garment, therefore, is commanded tak for dummy. It's considered like the one who seized it, because we know amirasa legavea kemisirasa lehadid. What do I say? Or do I say, in any event, he did not actually seize the garment. It's not his. And the Torah says, "V'yish ki yagdish is basic kiddush." And when a man shall sanctify his house to be kiddush, ma basic rishusay, just as his house, it has to be in his possession. Hafkol b'rishusay. So anything that he's makdish to the Beis Hamikdash must be in his possession. Ha'puki ha'idlei b'rishusay, to the exclusion of the garment, which is not in his possession, as he did not actually seize it, and therefore the hektish does not take effect. Now the Gemara attempts to answer the question. Tashma, come here, holding the last line of Bava Aleph, Dahi. There was a certain masusa there's a certain bathhouse over which two people were arguing, and which neither of them were in the possession. Hi Omar Didihu, V'hai Omar Didihu. This one said it's mine, and this one said it's mine. One of them got up and was makdish the bathhouse to the Beis Hamikdash. Rav Chananya, and all the Chachamim kept away from the bathhouse, and they did not want to bathe in this bathhouse because they did not want to be moil behektish, as they were uncertain whether the act of hektish took effect. And Rabbi said to Rabba, when you go to study before Reb Chizda in the town of Kafri, asking the Shiloh, what should we do in this case? He asked the Surah, when one of them, when on his way to Kafri, Rabba came to the city of Surah and told the Chachamim what happened over there. So Amnuna says, this question, this dilemma is found in the following Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? Saltik b'chedes, if there's uncertainty with regards to firstborns, whether a human firstborn or an animal firstborn, whether they are kosher animals or not kosher. So the din is, the firstborn of the donkey, the burden of proof rests upon the claimant. The claimant may not take the animal from its owners, or the redemption payment from the child's father. But Tani Allah, and it was taught with regard to this brisa, asurim begiza bava veda. Even though a kohen cannot seize something which he doesn't know really belongs to him, nevertheless, it's usher from shearing and from working such an animal, as the status of the becher is the suffix. Now, Hanuna continued, now here, where the Mishnah effectively says that if a kohen forcibly seized an animal whose status as a firstborn is uncertain, so what do we say? Ein Beis Din does not remove it from his possession. As we just said, that and even when the kohen did not seize it, that one is usher from sharing and working it. So the fact that the kohen will remain in possession of the animal, or he to seize it, suffices to accord the animal to be hektish, even in the case where the kohen did not seize it. So the same is true in the case of the masus of the bathhouse. Even though the one who consecrated had not taken possession, nevertheless, the consecration is effect. That's what he answered him. He said, you see over here, the case of Becher, Savik Becher, and then we said, nevertheless, so the same thing would apply, the masusa, that the Mitzad Safik, the consecration takes effect. So Rabba says, there's no proof. You cannot compare the cases. Kedushas Becher Kamris, you're giving a psak from the sanctity of a firstborn. I could really tell you that if a kohen seized it, the Beis Din removes it from his possession, as there is no validity to the ownership acquired by force. And so, when the Mishnah says that it means that the kohen must bring proof that the animal is a firstborn. And nevertheless, one is also from sharing and working such an animal, as sanctity that emerges by itself is different. The kedusha of a becher does not result from an act of hektish. Rather, the hektish, the kedusha by itself is at birth. Therefore, the suffix with regards to the sanctity is intrinsic, and one is also from using the animal as long as the suffix exists. Said to Rabba, Tanya, the Messiah Lach. Allah is telling a brayso that supports your opinion that if a kohen seizes an animal whose status as a firstborn is uncertain, that then is mציעא, the Beis Din removes it from his possession. Why? The hasfek is nichlas l'dilis aser. So the animals whose status as a becher is uncertain enter into a pen to be tied. They're brought in together with the rest of the young animals, from whom the animal tithe is separated. And this is despite the fact that the halachas of an animal tithe do not apply to our firstborn animal. That's the din. And if you think that in regards to an animal whose status as firstborn is uncertain, the kohen sees the Beis Din seizes it from the kohen. I'm sorry. So talk again. The Beis Din does not remove it from his possession. So why do these animals enter to the deer, to the pen? Is this the case of the owner exempting his property from the property of a kohen? If the animal belongs to the kohen, it cannot be used as meiser, since one is obligated to separate the animal from his own animal, from his own animals. So Abaye said to him, if his support for Rabba's opinion is due to that brayso, it does not support the master. Here we're dealing with a case, we're dealing with a case where the owner has only 9 animals, and the animal's status as a firstborn is uncertain. Since whatever way you look at it, the owner of the animal is pater. If the animal is not a becher, so then it belongs to the owner and is subject to the obligation to be meiser as part of the group of the 10 animals. And if the animal is a firstborn, so it belongs to the kohen, and the animal are not subject to the obligation of meiser. So since the 9 animals belong to the owner, are not subject to tithe. Then Abaye says, that which I said is not correct. In other words, contrary to what I said, the animal's status as a becher is uncertain, is not subject to meiser. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, if before one completed being meiser the animal, one of those already counted jumped back into the pen amongst the animals and that had not been counted, all those in the pen are put there from obligation to give of meiser. Why? Because each of them could be the animal that was already counted. And if it enters in your mind that the animal whose status as firstborn is uncertain, that suffix requires meiser, let him give meiser and whatever way you look at it. Shaper Meiser, because if the group of the 10 emerging now renders the owner obligated the animal's Meiser, he is giving Meiser. And if it does not render the owner obligated to the animal's tithe, as one of the 10 animals that was previously counted, Nifter b'minyan aro, nevertheless, each of the other 9 is exempt from animal tithe due to the principle of the tally fit to reach 10. The Rava says, minyan haro patri, a tally fit to reach 10 exempts oneself from the obligation of Meiser. If one began counting animals for the purpose of Meiser, and when he began to tally the group was fit to be Meiser, but ultimately he was unable to separate the Meiser, for example, because one of the animals died, and there was only 9 left, those who were counted while the tally was fit to reach 10 are exempt from the requirement of animal Meiser, and the owner is not required to include them in the Meiser of the following year. Similarly, in a case where one of the 10 animals was already counted, the other 9 are nevertheless exempted by his count, as while he was counting them, the tally was fit to reach 10. The Gemara says, Daf Zayin Amud Aleph, Elamai Yislach L'Meimer. Rather, what could you say to explain why one is not required to give Meiser in a case where a counted animal jumped back into the pen? Hasiri Vadem Rachmana V'Lei Hasiri Sufik. The Torah says a certain tenth, but not uncertain tenth. Achanami here also, Hasiri Vadem Rachmana V'Lei Hasiri Sufik. The Torah is telling me a certain dafke has to be for sure, not the suffix. Okay, so what are these animals of uncertain status that are subject to the Meiser according to the Mishnah? If you say it's the animals whose status as firstborn is uncertain, the Torah says it shall be sacred, but not something that is already. Therefore, since an animal's status as a firstborn is a suffix, is already considered Kaddish due to the suffix, the sanctity of the animal tithe would not apply to it. Rather, the Mishnah is referring to the case of a suffix redemption of a firstborn donkey. In other words, a lamb used for Padiyah, for a donkey's status as a suffix is a suffix. And this is according to the statement of Rav Nachman. If a Yid has 10 donkeys whose status as a Bechir is uncertain in his home, so Ma'afrish Alein Asiri saying, he separates 10 lambs to redeem them, and he gives Meiser, he masters the lamb, separating it as Meiser, and they all belong to him. The Kohen cannot prove that he's entitled to any of the 10.